Olá pessoal, tudo bom? Boa tarde. Sejam bem-vindos de novo aí ao Congresso, né? Hoje nós temos uma palestra bem bacana, bem especial. Nós vamos falar sobre Maltes Belgas e o seu legado nas cervejas. E teremos então com a gente o Giovanni da maltaria Dingemans, que vocês já sabem, né? Melhor maltaria de Maltes Belgas lá da Bélgica, lógico. Então estarão com a gente o Giovanni e o Thomas da Dingemans, e também temos uma participação especial do Wener, que é da cervejaria Founteinen, e ele vai nos contar um pouco sobre o processo da produção de lambic deles lá na Fonteinen, inclusive alguma coisa sobre blendagens, né? Então vai ser uma conversa bem legal, né? Como vocês sabem, essa é uma palestra que vai ser em inglês, nós não faremos a tradução da palestra, mas fiquem à vontade para fazer as perguntas, né, se ficar alguma dúvida. Tem um íconezinho ali embaixo escrito Ask a Question, façam as perguntas nesse ícone, tá? No lado, essa tela que está aparecendo, todo mundo dando boa tarde para vocês aí, é a telinha de conversa nossa para que a gente possa se descontrair um pouco e ficar conversando, né? E então é isso. Eu vou deixar que as pessoas, né, os palestrantes, eles mesmos se apresentem, tá? Até porque o Giovanni foi recentemente contratado na Dingemans e ele tem um background de cervejaria, então vai ser legal ele falar um pouco sobre ele, né? Então, hoje nós estamos na 9ª palestra, isso, Malte, do nosso congresso. As palestras anteriores, se vocês perderam, elas já estão todas no YouTube, então as outras 8 palestras já estão no YouTube da Agraria Malte, né? Segue a gente lá, dá um likezinho. Então é isso aí, eu vou passar a palavra para o Giovanni agora e boa palestra para todos nós. Giovanni, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Perfect. Yeah. Now I made a short introduction. I didn't present you guys yet, so it would be nice to hear some words about your backgrounds and what you do at Dingemans and
Yeah.
so on. Okay.
Okay. Perfect. So hi everyone. Short introduction. So I'm Giovanni, the craft marketing coordinator of Dingemans Maltings in Belgium. I started earlier this year to help Carl and Jan Dingemans with the marketing and to keep the contact with our growing portfolio of small Belgian and worldwide craft brewers. Besides working for Dingemans Maltings, I'm also active as a brewer. 10 years ago I started home brewing, and I always used the Dingemans malts, the caramelized malts, the roast malt, the special malts. And since December 2016, I started official with a brewing company called Agraria Craft Beers. First, I'm going to tell you something about the history of Dingemans Maltings, the different malts we use, that they use in the famous Belgian beers. And after that, my colleague Thomas will tell you something more about malt analysis. We also have a special guest speaker, that's Wener from Fonteinen, who is going to tell you more about some lambic gears in the vision of Fonteinen for the future. So let's start. So the Dingemans family started their company 4 generations ago in the small town of Stabroek, close to Antwerp. The first generation was Alexander Dingemans, who married Juliana de Beukelaar. They were farmers, so they're focusing on grain trades, and after that the production of the malt. And in 1875, they decided to start a malt house. So after that, we have the second generation. So that was Alphonse Dingemans. He continued to malt house in 1878. In this picture you see him surrounded by his 11 children. 7 of his sons were working at the malt house. And it's during this generation that the capacity for the first time increased, and all the work was done by hand, and all the barley was taken in big bags of 100 kilograms. Now bags are smaller. Now we have bags of 25 kilogram, or some are 50 kilogram, or really big ones of 1 ton. After the second generation, we have the third generation. That was Louis Dingemans. And Louis Dingemans had 6 brothers. They all worked at the malting house, each responsible for their own job. So some guy was producing the malt, another one was bagging the malt, one loading the kiln, another one did the sales. So a real family business. As the world developed, the making malt houses disappeared. For example, in 1949 there were still 69 malt houses in Belgium. In 1965 only 50, and nowadays we only have 5 malt houses left in Belgium. So you see here some pictures from the third generation. So the first one is the first truck we had, and it's one of Louis Dingemans' brothers. And picture in the right, you see 2 guys standing on the kiln in a nice suit, and the third one was working. You see also a picture of the kiln. It's the old kiln, which was partly loaded mechanical and partly by hand. Nowadays everything is mechanical. Then we go on with the 4th generation. So the 4th generation, Alphonse Dingemans, named after his grandfather and his brother Walter Dingemans. They made a lot of investments. So they built a new steeping house, new germination and kilning boxes, a wastewater treatment center, and some silos. The demand for customized malt for special beers increased in those days. So before we only had the small 500 kilogram roaster, but in 1990 we built our first 2-ton roaster. In those days, Dingemans Maltings became the only producer of specialty malts in Belgium. And thus today we are with the 5th generation running the malt house. So Jan and Carl, you see them here. They're the sons of Alphonse Dingemans, so not from Walter. They continue the traditions and they invest a lot in the production facility. So in 2000, a new silo complex for the roasted and caramelized malts was built, and they also built a 2nd roasting drum, which you can see here, releasing some fresh malts. Some years later, in 2008, they built a prototype roaster of 4 tons, and currently this is the biggest roaster worldwide. Then last year we completed our new malt house, Lausman Street. Here we have 2 steeping vessels of 55 ton each. Afterwards, we have 6 germination boxes of 55 ton each and a kiln. And next to the kiln, we built a co-generator to produce our own electricity. We are one of the only malt houses that are still independent and have always been run by family members. During all those years, we developed from a small independent malt house that produced nearly 400 kilograms of malt a day to a beer family business that produces around 100 tons of malt a day. 2/3 of it specialty malts and 1/3 is Pilsen malt. So now I'm going to tell you some more about the malts that we produce. So for the moment we use barley, rye and wheat as our raw materials. We are situated in the triangle of France, UK and Holland, so a lot of our raw materials are coming from these countries. With those raw materials we produce 5 big categories of malt. 4 of them we sell worldwide. The last one is only for the Belgian market. It's quite new, it's the Belgian origin. So that's organic barley grown in Belgium and used in some famous Belgian breweries like Dupont, Bruno, Brasserie Artisanale de Rue, etc. So the first category I'm going to highlight is the kiln malts. So the kiln malts, these malts are first intensively steeped, so with a lot of water. Depending on the harvest conditions, this can vary between 18 hours up to 38 hours. Of course, the time can also vary depending on which type of malt is produced. After that, the barley goes through a germination period of 5 to 6 days. Depending on the malt type again, the maltsters change the germination temperature. The base malts like Pilsen, wheat, rye, pale, and Munich are mostly germinated between 15 degrees and 20 to 25 degrees. The kilning temperature for our Pilsen, wheat, rye, and pale occurs at 80 to 85 degrees, and Munich is between 95 and 100 degrees. The darker malts, like aromatic aroma, are stewed during the end phase of the germination. So the temperature goes up to 55 or 60 degrees. The liquidation and the saccharification already starts in the germination box. So these malts are intensively kilned between 100 and 110 degrees. So we have different kinds of kilned malts. So we have the Pilsen, the pale, the Munich, amber aromatic, the aroma 100, aroma 150, wheat and rye. And they all have their own things. So a lot of breweries in Belgium use our Pilsen, pale and Munich malt. So these 3 malt types can be used as a base malt and used up to 100% of the grain bill. Our Pilsen and pale malts are known to be well modified with low viscosity and low beta-glucan content. In combination with low soluble protein and bowling color, but also with a high enough free amino nitrogen that you need for your fermentation of your beers. So the malt can easily be mashed in at 63 degrees. The protein rest at 35 degrees is not needed with our Pils malt and other malts. Then we go on with Munich. So the Munich is further modified during germination because we need enough soluble protein and sugar compounds to combine to make enough Maillard reaction happening. The aromatic and amber malts at the other end, they are 50 EBC and can be used up to 30% of the grain bill. Belgian brewers use this type of malt in Trappist and Abbey Amber beers, and it's one of our top-selling malts. Why is that? Because we deliver all our malts to all Belgian and Holland Trappist Abbeys, and they use it. So how do we produce this malt? Well, we have a very intensive germination, and at the end of this process, we stop the fan. And due to this, the CO2 level and the temperature will go up, and the soluble protein will increase a lot. After this intense germination, we will transfer the malt into the kiln and dry it at higher temperatures, normally up to 100 to 105 degrees, to arrive at a color of 50 EBC. This malt has a strong aroma and gives a very deep reddish color. So due to the aesthetic power, this malt always needs to be used with high enzymatic Pilsen or pale malt. Another type is the Aroma 100, so also used in amber beers and in some Belgian or UK stouts. This malt gives fullness and a very good rounding of the beer color, and it pronounces the malty flavor very much. It is advised to use it up to maximum 20% of the grain bill. And then the darkest one of our kiln malts is the Aroma 150, also used in beer types as mentioned before, so the dark Abbey beers, the Trappist, etc. Then we have our wheat malt, used a lot in wheat beers like Helles Weizen, Dunkelweizen, and Belgian wheat beers like Hoegaarden, Blanche Namur, and Vedette White. It gives a very specific, nice little sour taste. As you know, wheat malt increases the foam stability of the beer, so it can be used up to 70% in wheat beers. Some Belgian brewers use our wheat malt in smaller amounts in triples or heavy blonde beers like Caramelized and La Chouffe. Or they use also some raw wheat of a mix in the wheat beers. Then the last one of our kiln malts is our rye malts. Rye can be used in different kinds of beers. As you know, the viscosity is very, very high, so it can really block the filtration. So we really aim every batch of rye to a lower viscosity. Rye malt can be used in Belgian saison beers. It gives a very nice dry taste, or in smaller amounts in high alcohol blonde beers, but also in dark beers. For example, I use 20% of rye malt to brew one of my imperial stouts. Then the second category is our caramelized malts. Caramelized malts cannot be produced on the kiln. So for production of the caramelized malts, the barley is long steeped and intensively modified during germination, so enough of the enzymes are formed. The enzymes will already transfer the starch into sugar during malting instead of the brew house. The malts are then sacrificed in the roasting drum for 1 hour. During this hour of saccharification, the alpha and beta amylase will transfer the starch into sugar, and afterwards it's being carefully dried in the drum at a specific temperature to arrive at a certain color and taste. The temperatures between 110 and 155 are reached. If you use 5% caramelized malt in your beer, the foam stability is also improved and the beer will have more body. We also have different types of caramelized malts. So we have the Cara 20, Cara 50, Cara 120, Cara 200, and the Special B. The lightest form is the Cara 20. It's between 10 and 20 EBC. It's a light crystal malt, and we dry this malt at a low temperature, so the color does not increase too much. This malt can be used in a pale or even in a pilsen to give a more round and full taste of the beer. In the same category, we also have the Cara 50, the Cara 120, and the Cara 200. So these malts in combination with our Special B are used in a lot of Belgian doubles Abbey style beers and also in the Trappists. Some brewers prefer to work with aromatic and amber malts, and others like to work with the more caramelized malts. It all depends on the specific taste you want to achieve for your beer. Last in this category is our Special B. So after a dark caramel malt is finished, this malt will be dried again up to 300-350 EBC. The malt can be used up to 10% and gives a high caramel taste and is often credited with raisin flavor in some Belgian dark Abbey beers or Trappists. It can be used as a substitute for chocolate or black malt when less bitterness is desired. As you can see the picture, Trappiste Rochefort in Cuvée du Château, they use special B as malt. Then we go on with roasted malts. So all the roasted malts are produced from normal good Pilsen malts, which have been steeped, germinated, and kilned. After the kiln is cleaned and all the rootlets are being removed. After that, it goes to the roasting drum, where we play with the temperature depending on the color we need. Our different types of roasted malts are biscuit, M-roast 900 or chocolate malt, M-roast 1400 or deep bittered black, M-roast wheat or and peeled roast barley. So our biscuit malt is the lightest of them. So roasted on low temperature, so it's more like a toasted malt. It can be used in different darker beers, and it will provide a warm biscuit flavor. It will give a more brown color to the beer. The negative thing is this malt has no enzyme, so it can be used up to 15 or 20% of the grain bill, combined with some Pilsen or Pale Ale malt to get a good filterable wort. The M-roast 900 and M-roast 1400, also called chocolate and deep bittered black malt, are mostly used for dark heavy beers and stouts. They can be used up to 5% of the grain bill. The deep bittered black malt is produced in a specific way. So during the roasting, we play with temperatures and steam. And due to the steam, we will evaporate and eliminate the bitter parts from the grain during roasting. Then quite new in the range of our roasted malts is the M-roast wheat malt, which is slightly roasted to 30 EBC. It can be used in box, brown ales, stouts, dark beers, and it gives a unique taste. Also in this, it gives a unique taste. Also in this range we have a unique product which is called peeled roast barley. So this peeled roast barley is barley which has been dehusked, and afterwards it is being roasted to a certain temperature. Then at last we have the fourth category that we sell, and that's the organic malts. So we have different types of malt also available in organic type, like our Pilsen malt, Pale, Munich, Cara 125, biscuit, and M-roast 1400. So as you all know, Belgium is worldwide known for its diversity of beers, and we are very proud to be part of all those great beers. We are especially proud to be the only malt house supplying all Belgian and Holland Trappist breweries like Orval, Westmalle, Westvleteren, Chimay, Rochefort, La Trappe, Zundert, Achel, and so on. Some of them are using 100% our base malts, others partially, but all of them use our special malts. Okay, I'm gonna highlight a few Belgian styles and their malts, give a possible recipe that you can use maybe in the future. So first we have the strong ale or quadruple. So some brewers give this type of ale also the name quadruple as a logical follow-up of the double and the triple. The strong ale is a very high alcohol beer between 10 and 12%. The production of alcohol goes together with a large production of esters. The color of the beer is situated between 35 and 100 EBC. So if you want to make a strong ale, possible grain bill that you can use is 70% of our Pilsen malt or Pale Ale, depending on the final color you want. 20% of the Cara 120 malt, 9% special B, and 1% of the M-roast 900. Depending on the brewmaster, you can add some extra caramelized or refined sugar to become the higher alcohol. Due to the Cara 120, you get a lot of caramel, honey, and bread aromas, and you can also taste some burnt sugar, vanilla, and toast in your beer. These tastes are also followed by raisins, figs, and even chocolate and coffee due to use of the special bee malt in combination with a small amount of the roasted malt. The combination of a lot of the alcohol and the malty flavors gives a very full-bodied beer, which results in a sweet taste sensation. One of the most famous Belgian quadruples is the Sint-Bernardus Up 12 or the Gulden Draak. Style is the Flemish red ale. So Flemish red ales are light sour, dark and malty beers brewed in a part of Belgium. Some of these beer breweries already exist since the 7th century. After the first fermentation of the beer is kept on wooden oak vessels called foeders for more than 1 year. The final beer is a blend of a young and an old beer. And typical for this style is the higher concentrations of malic acids that are produced due to the lactobacillus bacteria who are living in the foeders. The alcohol concentration is between 4 and 6%, and the beer color varies the 55-75 EBC. So if you want to brew a Flemish red ale, you can use 35% of pale malt, 35% of Munich, 10% of aromatic malt, and 20% of aroma 150 malt. The beer style is often described as an interesting mix of cherries, oak, vanilla, and some red fruit flavors like red berries, raspberries, and also prunes. The malt acidity highlights the fruity flavors in the mouth. So these complex tastes are kept in balance through the sweet malty and toffee taste coming from the aromatic and the aroma 150 malt. The strange balance between sweet and sour creates a very refreshing beer. A third style is a saison. So saison beers were originally brewed on farms in one season, mainly in the winter. These are two advantages. So the farmers had something to do in winter time, and the beer protected people against diseases like the flu in the winter months. The saison has a low alcohol, fruity and spicy, refreshing aroma with a lot of CO2. Most of the saisons are brewed only with Pilsen malts and some rye for the dry aftertaste. So most of the beers in this style are described as a complex taste with tropical fruit, lemon, some mango, grapefruit combined with dry freshness and spicy taste coming from the rye malt. Subtle malty sweetness coming from the pils compensates the bitterness of the beer. So famous Belgian saison is the one from Dupont or the Saison de Dauphine from brewery De Ranke. Then we have our Belgian white ales or wheat beer. So wheat beer is one of the unique Belgian beer styles that you can recognize due to the hazy aspect with aromas of orange and coriander. The alcohol lays between the 4.5 and the 5.5%. The beer has a golden yellow color and has a spicy and light sweet sour taste from the wheat. So possible grain bill is 50% Pilsen malt, 50% wheat malt. The combination of a nib of lactic acid with the wheat malt provides a very refreshing, fresh and very drinkable summer beer. So in general, the beer is described as an intense citrus aroma due to the orange zest that we use, but also some taste of banana, apple, coriander together with the wheat and the grain taste. Then the last category I will highlight is Lambic and Geus, true Belgian heritage, only brewed along the Zenne River around Brussels. Normally between 4.5 and 6.5%, but higher is also possible. It's a light amber color between the 10 and the 30 EBC. Possible grain bill is 50 to 60% of Pilsen malt, 40 to 50% of wheat malt or raw wheat, depending on the brewery. Wener van Obberghen, co-owner of Founteinen, will tell you some more about lambic use and the vision of Founteinen for the future later on. For now, my colleague Thomas will tell you some more about malt analysis.
Hello everybody, I'm Thomas Eysackers, malt engineer here at the Maltes Dingemans factory. I now work for 7 years here at the beautiful factory, and I'm going to tell you something more about how to analyze a malt analyze and how to make an interpretation of it and what's behind a malt analyze. First, you need to know how we make malt. So malt we make by steeping. First, we steep our barley. After the steeping, we go to the germination box, and after the germination box, we go to the kiln where the malt is dried. There are actually 3 important parameters for making good malt. It's all be managed during the germination. We have the moisture, we have the temperature, and we have the germination time. Those are the 3 most important parameters to make good malt. It has to be said that making malt isn't something like chemistry. When you do chemistry, you have product A, you put product B with it, and you get product C. Making malt is actually a biochemical process, and it's not you have A and B, you make C. No, you have to manage all those parameters during your germination, and it's also depending on which type of malt, which type of grain you are using to make a specific malt. Okay, on the next slide I'm going to show you a malt analyze, and then I'm going to tell something more about what's behind the analyze. So you have to know moisture, temperature, and germination time is the most important thing. Okay, at the next slide, I don't know if you can see you can see the mouse moving over the screen. Okay, over here you have 2 types of wheat malt. 2 types of wheat malt with both a different type of malt analyze. The first one, let us say it is less intense germinated like the second one. How can you see it's less intense germinated, the first one than the second one? There are some parameters. I will tell you more soon. First thing you need to know, those 2 batches are all germinated for 5 days. Here at Dingemans Maltings, we germinate all our malt, even the wheat malt, the rye malt, the barley malt. We all germinated for 5 days. So that's actually for all our malts, all our malts the same. But now, how can you see the first wheat batch is germinated less intense than the second batch? There are some parameters I want to show you. The first thing you can see is that the soluble proteins of the first batch, you have around 3.99% of soluble proteins. The second one, you have around 4.96% of soluble proteins. Here you can see that is the first parameter where you can see that the malt is germinated more intense. You also can see it at the Kolbach index. The Kolbach index is actually the soluble proteins No, not divided. Giovanni, excuse gedeeld door. Excuse me, the soluble proteins divided by the total proteins. Then you get multiplied by 100. There you have the Colbach index. So at the first batch, you see a Colbach of 37, and on the second one, you have a Colbach of 46. A second indication, the malt is germinated more intensely. Also, you can see when the soluble proteins of a malt are lower, so from the first batch compared to the second batch, you will see that the color of the malt will also decrease a little bit. You see, when with the first batch, you have a wort color of 3.5 and a boiled wort color of 5. On the second one, you have 4 and 6.2. So actually, the soluble proteins are correlated with the color. Why is it? Because during the kilning of the malt, the soluble proteins will occur a Maillard reaction. Maillard reaction is actually to make it quite to explain it quite easy. When you do a stack, you make a stack in on a barbecue. The stack will turn brown, and if you do it too long, it will turn black. Actually, that is when a Maillard reaction occurs. It happens also with malt on the kiln, but on a more or less than when you put a stack on the barbecue, of course. There are actually some other parameters to see that the first batch is germinated less intense than the second batch is due to the wort viscosity. You see the wort viscosity of the first batch is 1.94 and the second batch is 1.85. It's also an indication for less intense germinated malt. What does it want to say when I talk about less intense germinated malt and more intense germinated malt? That's where the moisture and the temperature comes up. So on the first batch, I will say we worked with a moisture temperature with a moisture of around, let us say, 40 till 42% during the germination. With the second batch, I worked, let us say, with moisture during the germination for around 43 till 45%. That's a first thing to when we want to make high intense germinated malt. We will work with higher moisture levels than we want to make less intense germinated malt. Then we will work around 40%. Also, the temperature is a thing that that's important. When you work with lower temperatures, the enzymes in the malt during the germination, they will work less harder. So they will make it slower. They're not working that hard. When we go to higher temperatures, they will become more active, and we will make more soluble proteins. Also, the extract of the malt will increase a little bit. So that's why we want to play with temperature. And in the first batch, let us say I worked with temperatures around 15 degrees till 17 degrees, and at the second batch I worked with temperatures from around 18 till max 20 degrees Celsius. With the first batch, it will be the first 2 to 3 days around 15 degrees, and with the last 2 days I worked with around 17 degrees. Second batch will be around the first 3 days 18 degrees, and at the last 2 days 20 degrees. So actually important to know is that when you have more soluble proteins, you will have a higher wort color and higher wort color. Now I highlighted 2 types of wheat malt, but actually it's the same story when you make like a Pilsen malt. But even when we make Pale Ale malt or Munich malt, we will even work with higher temperatures. With Pale Ale malt, we go to any temperatures of around 20 till 22 degrees, and even with Munich malt, we go to around 22 to 24 degrees Celsius during the germination, and we will work with even for Pale Ale malt with around 44 to 45% of moisture during the germination, and with Munich we even will go to 45, sometimes 46, but it all depends on which type of grain we are using. I think, it's a little explanation of how to make an interpretation of a malt analyze. I think there will be some questions afterwards, I think that's it, and I think I'm now gonna give the words to the 3 Fonteinen, I think. Okay.
Hello everyone. I'm Wener from 3 Fonteinen. First of all, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to present a bit what we do and where we are heading. So maybe I will first start off with a bit of a history on 3 Fonteinen. So the history of 3 Fonteinen goes back to even 1849, when it started as a kind of an inn, which is a very, let's say, a cafe, a bar for a lot of passage traffic. When we fast forward to somewhere mid of the 1900s, there is Gaston de België and his wife Raymonde, who take over the bar and turn it into a very popular place with a lot of local people, but also local cultural people like writers, politicians as well, and so on. 10 years later, beginning of the 60s, they take over another building, and they actually move their operations, being the blending part, the servicing, and they start to do a bit of a restaurant as well. At the same time, in that same building, Gaston starts to dig out caveaux, or kind of a cellar, in which 3 Fonteinen puts more and more oak barrels, puts away a lot of bottles in these caveaux, which I'm going to talk later on how they come about. Then we're talking about 70s, 80s, 90s, where you actually have a lot of people visiting the restaurant, but at the same time, the ever low in terms of popularity of Gueuze and Lambic. We're talking about mid-90s. There was only a handful of local people that were still drinking Gueuze, Lambic, Kriek. It's at that same time that Armand de België and his brother Guido that took over the restaurant and the bar and the blending operations from their parents. and they continued the restaurant. Even mid-90s, Armand starts to blend even more than before. And actually at the end of the 90s, around 98, he starts to brew himself. And that's a bit the beginning of the, let's say, modern history of the Fonteinen. After 2000, there's quite some increasing interest in traditional lambic and traditional Geuze. So a lot of people find out about Cantillon, about Fonteinen, the Gam, Hanses, and so on. And that is where Armand really starts to think about increasing the number of barrels, increasing the blending activities, increasing the brewing activities as well. There still was a little bump in the road in 2009 when there was a thermostat incident. So actually in the warm room where there's a lot of bottle conditioning going on. So, and I will explain the process afterwards, where the blends of lambic that are continuing to ferment in the bottle. Well, actually the warm room, the thermostat was set, or there was a default or defunctioning in the thermostat. And more than 80% of the bottles were affected in that warm room and were actually destroyed. In that sense, that 20% exploded, and the other bottles actually were so oxidized in the taste that they were not consumable anymore. But Armand got out. We're talking about, let's say, 2010, 2011. The Fonteinen was still in bad shape. But around 2013, he came with an idea to consolidate a lot of his operations on one location. That is also where Michael came into his life, and myself. So let's say the younger generation, if I can put it like that. And that is where we started to build a future vision. So that's a bit the recent or the whole history of the Fonteinen. Today, we are still a very small brewery. We are 15 people in the team, and a lot of, I think the average age in the team is around 30. So we really think of the Fonteinen as a new movement that is really driven by something authentic, something traditional, and a very beautiful entity and a product and a history that we can actually bring forward for the future. So in what follows, I will go over the different parts of our production process, from, let's say, the grain up to the bottle, what is happening in between. And I will also tell a bit about the future vision of the Fonteinen. So first of all, and I will come back to one of the comments that was made earlier, Fonteinen and traditional lambic in general, it's quite a very specific beer. So everybody knows that it's spontaneously fermented, what has been the standard for a very long time. Before Pasteur has studied all the different, let's say, phases in fermentation, all beers were actually fermented spontaneously. Lambic is still one of those beer styles that is, or traditional lambic at least, that is completely and 100% spontaneously fermented. So it's a very natural process. But one of the biggest differences starts with the ingredients. So in our grain bill, we do have malted barley, like every other type of beer, but there's quite a big amount of raw wheat, so unmalted wheat. That unmalted wheat can amount up to 40% of the bill. And everything actually comes back to, and that's also important in the view of the future vision, everything comes back to the Duchy of Brabant. We're talking about the 1300s, 1400s, where there is a Dutch that says that, okay, to be or to protect a bit the agricultural environment, we need to make our own beers with at least X percent of wheat in it. And that is where actually, if you go and look at the different beer styles that are still existing today around Brussels, you will find 3 beer styles. It's the wheat beers, or the wheat beers right from Brussels, roughly speaking, of course. Then you have the lambic beers southwest from Brussels and Pajottenland around the river of the Seine. And then, of course, also the saisons that you find more into the province of Hainaut, which actually used to be part of the Brabant Duchy. So that's a bit the historical background, just to mention one of the big differences between a normal beer, let's say, or any other type of beer, and traditional lambic. In terms of process, so by using those types of grains, we also have a very specific part in the brewing process, which is called the turbid mash, where we actually are going to take a part of the first steps of the mash, and we're going to boil it separately. When you're starting to use a lot of raw wheat, you will have a kind of a gray film at the top of your mash in the beginning, which contains a lot of starch and which contains a lot of very, let's say, rough and I'm looking for the word now, egg white. Proteins that need to break, that need to be broken. So we take that part and we will boil it separately in order to add it afterwards as well. So that is a very specific consequence of using a lot of raw wheat. And that's in or during the brewing part. Also very specifically for traditional lambic, during the boiling, we don't use fresh hops. We only use old hops. So when looking at the 2 particularities of hop, we have the conservation and we have the bitterness. As traditional lambic brewers, we're not looking for bitterness, but we want to have the preservative characteristics. So, and that's the reason why we use old hops. They have lost about 80% of their bitterness, but they keep their conservative or conservation characteristics. So that's the reason why we use old hops. In our book, old hops are hops that are at least 3 years old between the harvest and the usage of those hops. On average, the hops that we use are even more than 7 years old on average. The oldest hops that we are still using are from 1997, so 97. So it's 23 years old. So here on the slide, you see the actual brew house. Just to give you a quick guidance. So we have a 5,000 liter mash kettle. We have a 4,000 liter boiling kettle, and then we have 4 cool ships of each 1,000 liters. So the boiling itself, we also know that in current brewing methods, the boiling is reduced to half an hour. We actually still boil for the full 5 hours. Sometimes we even make, let's say, special brews that go back to historical ways of brewing. Back in the days, boiling of 18 hours was not an exception. Especially for specific types of lambic or specific types of lambic that would be used for example, making fruit macerations, especially Kriek. So that's the boiling part. Another big difference with any other type of beer brewing is the cooling of the wort. So we start with the mash. We boil for 5 hours. After the boil, there's more or less 4,000 liters of wort. Instead of cooling it down with specific techniques, we just pour it or we dump it, the wort, on our 4 cool ships. So 4 cool ships of 1,000 liter. And we leave it for the night. So a brew day with 3 Founteinen, it's not 8 hours, but because of the extended boiling or extensive boiling, it's even 13 hours. It's even 1 man day and a half. And we leave it up to the cool ship for the night. So from boiling point, or more or less 96 degrees centigrade, it boils down, or it cools down up to 18 degrees centigrade in the morning. That is also the reason that we don't brew throughout the whole year. We only brew from, let's say, beginning of November up to mid-April. If nights are good, and a good night for us is night temperature below, or the maximum night temperature below 10 degrees centigrade, even 8 degrees centigrade, then we will be brewing. But that means that we can only brew, let's say, 40% of the year, only in the cold months. So in the summer, we don't brew. People that say or that state that they can brew lambic in the summer, that is not traditional lambic. Just to give you an idea, from the 4,000 liters of wort, boiling wort, that go onto the cool ship in the morning, there is only about 3,000, 3,200 liters left. So we lose about, on average, weighted average, between 17 and sometimes even 27%. And that difference between the 17 and the 27% of loss is really a result of night temperature, humidity outside, air pressure even, wind direction, wind speed, all those different climate factors have an influence on the evaporation of the wort. So that's also a very big difference with other types of brewing. So yes, we do have only one recipe on our brewing system. We don't do an IPA on one day and a stout on another day. It's always the same recipe. I will come back for our future vision as well, but we do have our, let's say, little ways of having fun ourselves, even in the brew house. So when the boil or the boiling is done, when the cooling is done in the morning, we will transfer the wort to our barrel room. So the fermentation of the wort and the lagering of the wort happens in the same vessel, and that vessel is an oak barrel. That's also quite specific. So with a lot of other beers, if not all beers, you first have a fermentation tank and then you have a lagering tank, or at least a fermentation phase and a lagering phase. With Fonteinen or with traditional lambic, the oak vessels will have the lees still on the beer while it's lagering or while it's aging. So there's no filtering involved, or there's no pouring from one barrel to the other. So we just leave the beer for at least a full year, meaning 12 months, a full year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. That also means that young lambic, so lambic of 1 year old, maybe something to mention first, because of the oak barrels, lambic will be a flat beer. For the very simple reason that the carbonation or the CO2 that is formed during the alcoholic fermentation will evaporate through the staves of the oak barrels. So that's the angel share or la part des anges in French. So we leave the lambic like it is for at least 1 year. Then we have young lambic, but you can leave it for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. We even had barrels last season of 6 years old. What is happening during that period is, first of all, you have the traditional or the classical beer fermentation. There's also wild varieties of the Saccharomyces cerevisiae, but you also have your lactobacillus that will be kicking in, Pediococcus, and all of those different stages of fermentation, they gently go over into each other. And also, for example, dynamics of fermentation, dynamics of lagering really differ from season to season, but also from, let's say, the beginning of the season towards the end of the season. When you have a full house or a full barrel house full of barrels that have been fermenting already, the last brew of the season will ferment a lot easier than the first brew. Sometimes it happens that it takes 2 or 3 weeks before it starts to ferment at the beginning of a brewing season. Coming back to the young lambic will still have a lot of residual sugars from the brew. So we brew towards 13 degrees Plato. Young lambic can still have between 4, 5, 6 degrees Plato sometimes. The older the lambic gets, of course, the less residual sugars you will have, but you will have a lot more complexity coming from the oak barrels, but also, and that's very interesting to know and to understand, it's the functioning of Brettanomyces. Brettanomyces is a very powerful yeast in that sense that it's not rapidly growing in alcohol, but it can live in a lot of, let's say, in a very uncertain environment. It can live for a long time. And Brettanomyces, maybe you know that as well, is often referred to a goat because a goat, like the Brettanomyces, almost eats everything. So sometimes we also have some faults in the fermentation in the oak barrels. But most of the times, if we just leave it and let nature be, after a while it will be gone. For example, diacetyl, so the buttery flavors. Well, for us, it's a sign that there's something good going on. We just leave it. Something else is, for example, lactic acid, or if it turns out to be vinegar, that is something that is then lost. Just to give you an example, last brewing season we had 4 small barrels of very beautiful 3-year-old. Half a year later, they turn into vinegar, and we dumped them. So we could have used them next season as 4-year-old lambic to make a golden blend, for example. But we chose not to because it was not up to the expectations that we had and the standards that we still want to defend as Drie Fonteinen. So voilà, that's a bit on the process of the brewing and the fermentation and the lagering in oak barrels. And then afterwards, so then we have a lot of people regard it as a very standard beer, which is lambic, but the richness of variety in between different types of lambic, in between different ages of lambic, it's incredible. Also, with Drie Fonteinen, we don't want to standardize. We have different sizes of barrels, we have different shapes of barrels, we move around the barrels when they're empty from one place to another, so dynamics change all the time. So we have a lot of different dynamics on the brewing system, but we also have a lot of different dynamics on the barrels. And that is actually where the exciting part starts for specifically lambic brewers and Geuze blenders, because you cannot determine what is happening on beforehand. You cannot say this one will turn out like this. And that is where the art of the blending comes in. So before actually going into blending, I will also talk about macerating, because once you have lambic, you can actually go 2 ways. Or you're going to put some fruit on it, or you can blend different vintages of lambic, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, and go to a Geuze. So I will park the Geuze for a moment. I will first start with the maceration. So what is actually a maceration or a fruit maceration? If we want to make a fruit beer like a Kriek or a Framboise, Framboise, or other types of fruit beers, we made macerations with peaches, we made macerations with plums, prunes, we made macerations with grapes. Actually, the principle is always the same. You take whole fruit, so entire fruit. So, for example, sour cherries, the most commonly used fruit. We take the whole sour cherry, without the stem, but still with the stone in the cherry. So we don't de-stone it, we don't puree it, we don't make juice out of it. We just put the whole cherries on to a oak barrel or a stainless steel tank. So the only stainless steel tanks that you will see with Drie Fonteinen are for fruit maceration. But more and more we're going back to oak barrels as well. It adds a bit more complexity to the results. So fruit maceration, we put the cherries and then we leave it be for at least 6 months. So the sour cherries, we take 1 part of sour cherries, typically 2,000 kilos and 2,000 liters of lambic. So it's a one-on-one cut between cherries, sour cherries, and lambic. And we just leave them. And what will happen during the maceration is that the lambic will start to consume the sour cherries. So the fruit flesh, the intensity of the sour cherries, also sugars, but also flavors and a bit of the acidity as well, will be transferred to the lambic. So after 6 months, everything that is left is a kind of a spent fruit mass with the pits, of course, with the stones, of course, but all the color, all the flavors have been transferred to the lambic. And that is what you have, a fruit lambic. And that's part of the maceration. And then we come back to what will be happening before bottling. And that is also where I will come back with the gueuse. So you can have a fruit lambic or a straight lambic of different vintages, and then we have to bottle it. So for a gueuse, we will go and taste young lambic, 2-year-old lambic, 3-year-old lambic. And that is really an art of the blender. It's something you cannot learn from a book, something you will have to learn from the generations before you. That is how Armand learned it from Gaston. That is how Michael learned it from Armand. And that is how a few of our colleagues in the team are now learning it from Michael. You cannot. It's not something you can learn from a book. It's really about tasting. It's really about experiencing, having the right combination of acidity, but also still a lot of complexity from the oak, and then mix it up and then bottle it. And that is actually what a gueuse is. It's a blend of 1, 2, and 3-year-old lambic. And in some of our blends, we also add 4 and even 5, and sometimes, very sometimes, 6-year-old lambic. The same with fruit. When you have a fruit maceration, you have a fruit lambic. We will add a bit of young lambic for the same reason why we add young lambic in a gueuse blend, for the continued fermentation in the bottle. So again, it's not a second or a third fermentation, it's a continued fermentation. We don't add any yeast at any moment, not even in the prior to bottling. We don't add any yeast, we don't add any sugar. The young lambic still has enough residual sugar to actually get the fermentation continuing in the bottle. That's also the reason why we don't filter, because even in suspension with your blend, you will have a lot of those wild yeast still living, especially when they see some of the young lambic still, they're going to kick in again in the bottle. But differently from the oak barrel, when you have the continued fermentation in the bottle, the CO2 cannot escape and it will go into the beer. And that is how a lambic or a blend of lambic will be turned into a gueuse, and a fruit maceration with some of the young lambic will be turned into it's also a fruit lambic, but then we go to a kriek instead of a kriek lambic. We go to framboze instead of framboze lambic. So, and that is how we go from a very complex process to something that we try to do every time we try to make something that is really our taste. And we cannot standardize it. So we make blends on between 3,000 and 6,000 liters. But every time again, we start from scratch. We don't take the same barrels. We don't take the same brews. We cannot make the same brews either. But we really start from scratch every time. That's the reason why we are so outgoing on putting the blend numbers on the bottles, because every blend for us is a different gueuse or is a different beer. Voilà. So that's a bit the main process. Maybe a bit more on what we have done over the last couple of years. So our barrel room has now a capacity of about 8,000 hectoliters. That may look a lot. It is also a lot. So 800,000 liters of beer, but we only make 3,000 liters of bottled production every year with those 8,000. So that means that the average time that a drop of lambic remains in the barrel room is more than 2.5 years. and that's only in the bottle or in the barrel room. The bottle conditioning, so from the moment that we bottled, we put it away in our barn room. Before it gets launched or sold, it takes another 9 months on average, with even now evolving because of the COVID crisis, it's even evolving to a year. And some very specific beers like Golden Blend, the Schijbekse cake, we leave it even for a full year of bottle conditioning. So that means that also, and that's part of the complexity of what we're doing, we always need to take care that in our barrel room, we still have enough of old lambic to use in blending. And that is where you cannot, if you want to grow a bit as a lambic brewer, you really have to look 4 years into the future to organize actually your day-to-day brewing, day-to-day bottling. And that's the time it takes before you can make a decent bottle of Geuze. In our book, it's 4 years. And that's a bit what I will say the stubborn character or the very direct line of Gaston and Armand. That is something we would like to continue for the future. And I think that one of the most beautiful compliments we ever got from Armand as a team was that we are even becoming more stubborn than he was. And that actually brings us a bit to our future vision. We are very glad to start or to work with Malterij Dingemans. For everything that is our malt. We like to work with them because of the fact that they are the last independent maltery in Belgium. As for the raw wheat, we have always worked with a local mill, but we have actually started a new big idea 3 years ago, and that is where we want to source more and more locally. So we're now talking to 15 farmers to go back to really the heirloom wheat varieties that are coming from Pajottenland. 150 years ago, the goose culture or the lambic culture was so rich. There were more than 90 brewers and almost 300 blenders in the region of Brussels, Valley of the Seine, and Pajottenland. And it's completely lost. But what was also very interesting and a very nice model is that the local farmers were actually supplying the malteries, were supplying the breweries. And that is something with the industrialization of the agriculture, that is something we have lost as well. And we would like to go back to those local cooperations. And that's the reason why now we are working with those 15 farmers. So they are growing very old varieties coming from different parts that used to be Brabant. We are actually multiplying or trying to multiply, because it's not always a success, trying to multiply 35 old varieties for the moment. So it will take another 5 to 7 years before we have really decent amounts to also provide to other breweries. But this harvest and last harvest, we can actually supply in our own needs for cereals, which has been a major step for us. Also, in terms of fruits, the Schijbekse cherries, we have been working, or that is something I think Armand started out with 10 families that he knew. Meanwhile, we have more than 80 families that are providing us with hand-picked Schijbekse sour cherries, so really the local variety. We are talking to specialists in heirloom varieties of plums, peaches, other types of sour cherries, and so on. So that is really something we would like to develop and get everything back. So all the ingredients, get them as local as possible. And yeah, that's a bit about Fonteinen. So where we come from, what we're doing, what we're going to continue to do, and especially also the direction that we're heading. So voila. Again, thank you very much for the opportunity. I guess if there are any questions, you can just ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Werner. Very nice to know a little bit more about your brewery. I'm a big fan of Founteinen, and a big fan of sours. And this is a big market now. Not a big market yet, but it's a market that's growing in Brazil, and that's very nice, to hear from you and maybe to keep the interest or raise the interest in lambics and gueuses in Brazil. Also, thank you guys from Dingemans, Giovanni and Thomas. Like I said, I'm gonna say não sabendo, mas para quem não sabe ainda, nós vamos ter o nosso curso técnico cervejeiro no ano que vem, aqui no Colégio Imperatriz, né? E os docentes seremos nós, mestres cervejeiros aqui da Agraria, e também alguns outros especialistas nas áreas específicas. E então vai ser um curso bastante legal, com um grande diferencial que nós temos toda a cadeia, né, toda a estrutura, sanar as dúvidas que talvez vocês tenham sobre como vai ser esse curso. Mas vai ser um curso bacana, integral, 1.400 horas, com estágio incluído, então vai ser bem bacana, tá? Vou voltar aqui para as perguntas, né? Nós tivemos 8 perguntas.
There will be no less products going to the market. We will still have the same products we will send out. What the COVID itself will bring, we don't know. But in the beginning here in Belgium, we had some decrease in production. We decreased because there was less. The customers wanted less malt, but now at the moment everything is stabilizing and we are now back at full production. For the moment, I will say that there will be no products that get out of the market or something like that. So I think for the moment everything will go on and you can get the products you want. What it will be in the future, we don't know. It will all depend. Will we get a second lockdown or not? At the moment we had a lockdown in March and April. We don't know. We think maybe when there's a second lockdown, I don't know, we will maybe decrease our production a little bit again, but let's hope not. But even then, when we decrease the production, we try to have all the products in stock. So all the products we produce, we want to have them in stock enough. So it's a little bit difficult, but at the moment there will be no problem. Let us say.
Nice. That's nice to hear. I think we are having some technical problems here. I don't know, guys. I don't know if people can at least hear us, but we have some connection problems for. Don't leave us, guys. We are almost fixing it here. Guys, I think we are back now. Giovanni,
Okay. I still see a frozen image of myself, so
yeah, we are gonna Wener, try to turn on your camera. We are gonna try to share the image here. I don't know if the Diamond guys are listening us.
yeah, we hear you.
Okay. So Wener, the next question is for you.
Yes.
The aged hops you use to produce the lambics, do you buy them aged or do you let them age at the brewery? We saw a picture there, but do you use pellets or flowers?
Actually, both. Yeah, both. Because and also it also has to do with the increasing popularity of craft beer. It's really hard to find old hops. We do know some growers that specifically put away a part of their fresh hops and age them themselves. And yeah, typically they offer them to us after 3 years. So we're going for the English and German noble hops. But also, that's also something I forgot to mention. There's the reason why we use old hops is because there are some very particular types of hops that got lost in the region, and we're talking about the Record, but also the Coignot. And Coignot is actually a hop. Its economical return is very low. It's only 1/3 or a quarter of what you usually get from a hop harvest, and it only has a bitterness or alpha acid level of 2.5%, which is really low. So also in the let's say economical thinking of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, that was the first types of hops that disappeared in our region. But it was used by traditionally it was used by lambic brewers. So we, just to give you an idea, we still have for 5 years of brewing of hops that are stored with us. So we also age them a bit with us, and we use very roughly. We try to buy what we can find or what we get offered. But we do have friends in Germany that actually age them for us as well.
And how do you age them? Do you age it like cooled or room temperature?
Warm room, and you just. I'm really sorry if I'm so blunt, but you just punch holes through the bags and you put them in a warm environment. And with us, it's typically in a warm room where we have temperatures throughout the whole year of 18 to 20 degrees centigrade.
Perfect. I'm still on you, and later on I'm gonna go back for the first question because I think we missed it for the people that are listening to us. So the next question: Do you have said that the beer process can take between 2, 5, or even 6 years? How long time the wort is left in open air? Like how long does it ferment in the barrel opened, and how long do you leave these oak barrels closed?
So we leave the wort for a night on the cool ships. So in the morning, it's then transferred to the barrels. And then actually we don't measure it. We just look at it. The moment that it stops foaming, because the foaming is an indication of the first fermentation. When it stops foaming, we actually fill the barrel up with fresh wort again, or with young lambic, and then we top it off. So then it's closed.
Nice. Another question here. Like said like that lambic production is less controlled. I don't know if I agree with that, but you don't use a pure culture yeast. No? That's
No
known.
yeast at all.
And would you like to explain us? Did you ever had like a barrel that got wrong? Did you have to dump beer out, or can you always like use 100% of the production by blending the beers?
Like I explained before, and that's a bit, that's where you can find similarities to vin jaune, you can find similarities to sherry. We have production or during the whole process in the barrel. There's also some volatile components that are formed, but if they go way too far, you get into the ethyl acetate, so which is a real like nail polish remover. Yeah, that's clearly a signal to dump the barrel. And the same with vinegar. If your lactic acidification goes too far, you're just making vinegar, and those are the things that we're not using while blending, and then it's dumping the whole thing. So it's making sure that it's arranged in terms of X sizes, and then it's all about dumping it. We don't use it.
Nice. On your presentation, there was an information that you have a 10% loss in the barrel when you empty the barrel. Why does this loss happen? Why this 10%?
Okay, so during the fermentation and the lagering in the barrel, there's also a pellicle that is formed. So you have to see it as a thin white pellicle that is, so it's a living part that is actually protecting the beer from all the rest. But after so many years of, or at least a year of resting in the barrel, when you're emptying the barrel, there will always be a part that is like gray matter. I'm talking about dead yeast or the lees on the bottom of the barrel, but also the pellicle that is actually shrinking. And as we don't filter, we do have a looking glass. We just close the valve at the moment that it's getting very turbid and gray. Voila, and that's about 10% of the barrel. It's more or less the bottom of the barrel.
And the last question for you. Are you open for visitors?
Currently not, but normally yes. And if I may add, we do have a lot of more and more Brazilian visitors as well.
I'm gonna try to visit you guys next time in Belgium.
You're very welcome. Yeah, absolutely.
So Werner, thank you again. No, that was the last question for you. It was a pleasure to have you with us, and you are also invited to come to Brazil and visit us here, and maybe talk a little bit more of the beers, about your beers. I'm excited to open one of your bottles because I have some in my aging chamber there. So I'm excited to open one of those bottles. Thank you.
Thank you very much also for the opportunity, and wish you guys all the best with all your endeavors. And hopefully one day I can come to Brazil. It's on my bucket list.
Yeah. So now we go back to the Dingemans, guys. We have 2 questions for you. Let me find the first one again. So about the market, the COVID market. Are you with us, Giovanni? And
yeah.
Okay. Could you please answer it again, because we had these technical problems?
That's no problem. So on the COVID crisis. So the question was if we still have all the products on the market. Actually, the answer is yes. We will have all the products on the market.
when the first COVID strike here in Belgium, we had a little lockdown, and we had a lockdown of 2 months, and then we had to decrease our production. But now at the moment we're back in full production, and even when maybe there will be a second lockdown, I don't know how the COVID crisis will go on. We will still have all the products on the market. It's a thing we try, even when we have less production. We always want to have enough stock of all the products we produce. So you don't worry about not getting a product. So yeah, no, okay. So don't worry about the COVID crisis for getting your malts.
Yeah, I'm also try to answer it by Agraria side. Pessoal, I'm gonna do it in Portuguese. Pessoal, vocês viram que nós não temos toda a linha de produtos da Dingemans, mas nós podemos sim trabalhar com toda a linha, não tem problema nenhum. Mas hoje a gente trabalha com vários produtos da Dingemans e que vocês podem conseguir com o representante ou o brew shop, né, que atende vocês. E os produtos que talvez tenham alguma ruptura e tal, isso a gente vai com certeza aí sanar com a próxima importação, tá bom? And the last question, how are you young guys in Belgium? How is the beer market for the young people in Belgium? Is it raising, or because we have some movements around the world that the young people are moving to distillates and whiskey and vodkas and gins and stuff. How is it in Belgium? How is the market for young guys?
That's actually difficult. I think there are two groups of people. So you have the beer drinkers and the ones who like the distillates more. As I see as brewer, the public who is going to beer festivals, the people get younger. So you see guys around their 20s going in large groups, going to festivals, even festivals where you need to buy tickets before the festival. Young people are coming to there. The thing is, more people also, so the younger people like the special beers, so like the IPAs, the Lambics, special stouts, barrel-aged beers. The older Belgian people are more, they're Duvel drinkers. And so they drink a Duvel, a Westmalle, a Rochefort, and they stick to their brand. And trying the other beers, or you really need to push them. So they're not that open for new stuff like the young people. But beer lives in Belgium. It always lived in Belgium. It still lives in Belgium. So I think maybe the younger people were also drinking the special beers. Maybe they drink also sherries or whiskeys, bourbon, but they do it together. So maybe early in the evening they drink some beers, and then later on they switch to the distillates.
And there is one new question now. How is the demand for Dingemans malt for the craft beer revolution? He says he saw some American breweries using special beer for brown ales, for example.
Yeah, the demand for the craft brews, we see that this market is growing. So we have more and more the craft brewers that are asking for Dingemans malt. So that's a good process for us. We are trying to craft brewers, they like to experiment with different things. So we are also trying to go with the flow of the craft brew. So we are thinking about making other types of malt and things like that. So due to the increase of the craft brewers that are wanting our malts, we need to get along. We try to do some things for them. So yeah, this market is growing actually.
Yeah, and to use Belgian malt, you don't necessarily have to brew Belgian beer styles. You can use it for any beer style you want. No?
Yeah.
Very nice, guys. Thank you again. No? And also, like I said to Werner, I'm looking forward to have you here in Brazil, and so we can have some Brazilian beers.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Beleza, pessoal? Obrigado, né? Quero deixar aí o convite para vocês para a palestra de hoje à noite, que é bem bacana também, que o tema é custos de produção de uma cervejaria, com o Carlo Bresciani, da Escola Superior de Cerveja de Malte. Então, bem bacana também para que vocês tenham uma noção e talvez uma visão diferente dessa interpretação de custos da cervejaria. Então, é uma palestra que nós já conhecemos, nós já tivemos essa palestra com o Carlo aqui em Company, é uma palestra que é bem bacana, não percam hoje à noite, e no decorrer da semana aí temos várias outras palestras, como por exemplo, na sexta-feira, José Antunes vai falar sobre aeração de mosto e impacto no processo no produto acabado, e o Marcelo da Bio4, quebrando o paradigma de uso de leveduras imobilizadas. Essas são as palestras ainda dessa semana. Conto com a presença de vocês. Obrigado pela participação, né? E desculpem alguns problemas técnicos, mas a gente sabe que isso pode acontecer às vezes, né? Então, essa palestra, daqui a pouco a gente já vai conseguir colocar ela no YouTube. Então, ela vai estar disponível para vocês no YouTube, para que vocês possam assistir por lá, mas também dá para assistir o replay dela aqui pelo Crowdcast. Beleza? Abraço, gente. Até depois.